Hey everyone, today I'm going to talk about Atelier Ryza 3, Alchemist of the End, and the Secret Key. I've reviewed the previous two games before on the channel, as you may know. On both occasions, Koei Tecmo actually gave me some review codes, but this time I had to buy a copy myself. I have the PS5 version, which is what you'll see the footage of. We'll even take a look at the limited edition later on. Because I've done reviews on the other two previous games, I'm going to make this video a bit different. A lot of the game is very similar to the previous two, so, I don't want to repeat myself over and over again. No need for repeating information needlessly. I actually haven't played the game as far as the other two when I reviewed them, but it's enough for me to comment about the game and how it is compared to Ryza 1 and 2. Nevertheless, I feel I should still point that out. So the game picks up after the events of Ryza 2, but about a year later. You can watch a rundown on previous events from the main menu if you want to get up to speed. I wouldn't say that that little movie replaces playing the previous games, as a lot of character dynamic is left out. It's more like a review, but if you know nothing about the series, at least you'll know much more than before. They are describing this as the last game of a trilogy. That may or may not be the case. Remember how the Arlen series got a fourth game around 7 years after its supposed last game, since those games were so popular? Given that the Ryza games are the most successful Atelier games ever, the Secret series, as the Ryza games are collectively known as, may get revisited in the future. Especially if the anime does well, I guess. This time round, the focus is on several islands that have mysteriously appeared out of nowhere. The group assembles once again to figure out exactly what's going on. Another thing, adding to the mystery, is that shortly after the islands started appearing, Ryza occasionally hears a mysterious voice. When doing alchemy, something similar happens again, but rather than a normal voice, it's a synthesis recipe that comes to mind and she decides to go ahead and synthesize it. Turns out it's a mysterious key. Everything's mysterious apparently. Sorry, my internal thesaurus seems to be unavailable. I don't really know how to phrase it better than that right now. But yeah, that's the gist of how this game's adventure starts. The game is an excellent mixture of exploration, a relaxing and nostalgic atmosphere, cute and interesting characters, and a deep crafting system. Overall, I really like Ryza 3. Exploration, battle, alchemy, and a lot of the environments will feel very familiar. Gameplay works in the usual JRPG way of running around in an overworld, battling monsters by coming into contact with them, and gathering items. Gathering items is a bit nicer now. You can do drive-by collecting, as I call it, so you don't always need to stop to pick stuff up. But if there's like an option for a tool, because some tools allow you to harvest different things from a plant, for example, then yeah, you still have to stop there. You can also jump around, which isn't new, but platforming is a bit more free now. There's more stuff to jump on and off of, and there's no fall damage, by the way, so yeah, that's something I'm quite thankful for. Battle is similar to the other two games. For some reason it feels a bit different. I don't know if it's just due to some changes in the camera angles or maybe the effects, but it just feels a bit more fast-paced. It's more exciting. I do think the game's slightly more difficult. I don't know, it's like I haven't played them all back-to-back now, but that's just my impression. You can go and switch to easy mode at any time, and there's no penalty if you prefer. The game world is a combination of new and old areas. You'll start in familiar territory, but soon you're exploring new places. As you probably expected, past locations can be revisited, and I think they're used quite effectively. Since the story follows the characters developing and growing over the years, it's nostalgic just running around where you've been before. Also, some may find this annoying, but I don't. It's several important locations from previous games. When you first reach them in this game, the characters reminisce a bit about their old adventures. It's only at the beginning of the game or when you first revisit a location, so I don't think that's really intrusive. But I don't know, some people have dialogue phobia when it comes to games like this. I wouldn't call Ryza 3 a sandbox game, but it is quite large and there's elements of sandbox type gameplay. It's sandboxy, I guess. Early on, you'll find a new area where there's it's very open, so there's a lot of different kinds of islands to explore, different monsters to fight, and there's lots of different items that you can collect as well. If it makes sense, it's a bit like there's various islands that depict various biomes, if you want to use that terminology. Other than fast traveling, you can traverse the area by swimming, riding dolphins, and using magical zip lines. They must be magical because they work uphill too. The dolphins kind of disappear if you get near the coast, which looks odd. It's a bit like you're ramming them into the coast and they get destroyed on impact or something. And in order for the zip lines to work, you have to get to both ends and activate them at the platforms. So as you run around, you'll get some spontaneous quests, like defeating some nearby monsters or collecting items. It's a way to earn SP, which you can use to unlock skill tree things. I think that's a good idea because it makes grinding a bit less repetitive. Instead of doing something over and over again, the game will give you a thing to do every now and then, and that just breaks things up a bit. And you get a bit of SP, or sorry, SP, and you know, yay. The graphics look good. Of course, they're very similar across all three games, but each game does have changes and improvements. Animations have been tweaked, so it's all a bit more natural than before. Though I wouldn't say that there are no awkward moments. It's still a game built on a budget, and there's lots of places that let you know that that is the case. Though I have to say, sometimes I'm not sure whether I prefer Ryza 2 or 3 in terms of looks. They just have a different look to them. There's some things I like more in Ryza 2, like often the lighting is better, and so, you know, is the water as well in certain situations. And there's other moments like that. But one thing that's a lot better in Ryza 3 is that on the PS5, it runs absolutely smoothly and consistently at 60 FPS, which was not the case with Ryza 2 on the PS5. It was, yeah. Maybe that's also the reason why some of the things just don't look as good. But nevertheless, the performance improvement is great. And since we're talking about visuals, we have to bring up fan service. That is a visual thing, unless it's in dialogue, I guess. I just don't feel like fan service is as plentiful and high quality as it was in Ryza 2, for example. With Ryza 3, you still have agreeable physics. There's still decent outfits. Platforming elements like climbing and crawling still end up being rewarding experiences. But overall, Ryza 2 was just higher spec. Clothing got more wet and see-through after swimming or being exposed to rain, at least that's what it looks like to me. The outfits did a better job of flowing in the wind when you're running. The riding pose and also the digging animations were excellent. In Ryza 3, the dolphin camera angle is all wrong. You can't really, get the camera angle quite right. And I don't think the clothing gets as wet as far as I can see. The effect is not as strong. A lot of the outfits make an effort to cover everything up from behind, and not to mention the physics are tweaked for the clothing to be a bit more concealing. They don't flutter around, so you don't really get to see much when you're running. Though there's always the outfits that just don't have, the jackety things, I suppose. There's one item with a skirt I've noticed where there is a void underneath, and yeah, that's never good. Plus, the victory and level up poses are better in the first two games. The poses / movements and camera angles are just a bit more creative and suggestive. Now the only hope is the anime. The Atelier series has always been suggestive, even during the 2D games. So yeah, I'd hate for that to go away. It's a signature of the series. Oh yeah, and if you buy the physical version of the game, you won't have access to some of the previous game's outfits. Unfortunately, some of the past outfits are only available if you buy the digital deluxe version or higher. So what about the people who bought the limited edition like me? I felt a bit stupid buying the same thing again, but digitally just so I can get the outfits I wanted. But moving on, the battle effects I think are really good in Ryza 3. It's very flashy and exciting looking. Yeah, that's basically what I have to say about that. Kind of a random spot for the sentence. I've just realized I should have put that in front of my fan service rant, but whatever. In terms of sound and music, as usual, I really like how the game handles the music. It's humble, calm, friendly, and nostalgic, but things become a bit more exciting when battling. I like that the soundtrack is reserved when it needs to be. Some fantasy games suffer from trying to be grandiose all the time, and that's not the case here. Also, all the sound effects sound pretty good, whether in battle or synthesizing. Nothing to complain about. Let's have a look at the limited edition. Overall, it's a bit of a mixed bag. It's not ugly or anything, but there's seemingly some laziness involved with the items, the illustrations, and the LE box itself. Feels a bit flimsy. But let's start from the beginning. For some reason, US Customs opened it up even though I'm in Canada. Looks like they took a peek inside the LE box and damaged the flap, which kind of creased it. I do think they tried their best not to be too intrusive, and the shrink wrap only had one perfectly straight cut, so at least whoever had to do it, was making an effort there. That aside, I think the box looks pretty good. I've already mentioned before that I like the art of the illustrations very much from the previous games. It's such a nice mix of storybook-style illustrations and anime. Here on the cover, we have an image of Ryza just chilling at presumably the harbor of her hometown. I also like the use of green, which is on the case sides here. There's a Victorian-style flower pattern going on the background, and that green color also fits that Victorian look as well, though I hope this doesn't contain Victorian amounts of arsenic. The back illustration is that funny looking one where Ryza looks gigantic and all the other characters look tiny. The box itself is a variation of an old NIS America classic. Yes, Koei Tecmo publishes Atelier games now, but LE duties still fall on NISA for some reason. If you look at NISA LEs from the early 2010s or thereabouts, you'll see this type of box used for everything basically. Hallmarks of this design are a flap for the front cover, which Ryza 3 doesn't actually have, a protruding edge on the back on the same side where the flap of the front lid is, and an interlocking spine section in the interior. Like I said, the flap doesn't exist here, which unfortunately creates a giant gap between the lid and the side of the box. This is like a Tesla spec panel gap. Overall, the box feels a bit flimsy. When you open it up, the interlocking bits can sometimes uninterlock. The internal paperboard structure that is supposed to hold the items together doesn't really do a good job either. I actually put the acrylic keychain back in its place before recording this footage. It was just like, I don't know, it was just all over the place when I first opened it up. This is a Japanese item given by the text on the plastic. I like it. The game itself, the same cover as the back cover of the LE with the unintentional giant Ryza. The back looks great too. I like the panoramic shot they added at the top. Highlights the open worldness a little bit. The little circular screenshots are a nice touch too. There's a disc, as you can imagine, and a little sheet of black and white, or rather gray paper that tells you to go online for a manual. Despite the lack of manual, the online manual looks very good, which is the case with all the other Ryza games as well. The background image is really nice. Mid-battle poses always seem to fit well into rectangular spaces when the character is rotated so that they fill the space diagonally, if that makes sense. Underneath the game is a download code for some outfits. Underneath the support piece, there's more stuff. A hardcover art book, a cloth poster, and those clear files that everybody loves so much. Yeah, some people really don't like these, but yeah, it's a thing. There's another support piece, but I can't quite figure out how it's supposed to hold everything in place. It's all just loose and goes everywhere. Not very effective. The cloth poster seems of good quality, and it's made in Japan. Same image again as on the front cover of the LE. And one of the clear files reuses the same image again, while the second uses the portraits that I'm pretty sure they're used when you switch a character mid-battle. They're like little cut-in images. The artbook features, guess what? The same LE box cover image. It's not a bad illustration at all, of course, but I think we've seen it on enough things at this point. The green Victorian-style border is very lovely, though. Quality is very good, and it's made in Japan too, though it's almost too thin to be a hardcover book. The inside is unfortunately not translated. Character portraits and details and environmental art can be found inside, and those are all the items in the limited edition. Basically, they threw a couple of Japanese market items in, which is normally okay. In this case, the keychain, artbook, poster, and clear files. But I really would have liked a translated artbook. Also, there's plenty of art they could have used instead of reusing the one with Ryza sitting at the harbor, on everything. It's just on too many things. And the LE box is just a bit too flimsy, with the structure inside not being able to properly hold everything in place, not just in transit through the postal system, but even just when you're carrying the thing around. That hardcover art book just moves around, which isn't great considering how heavy it is. So yeah, I'm not super impressed. I like when they include Japanese market items, but I don't think it was done correctly here. It just seems a bit lazy, and too much of the same art being reused. And a flimsy box. Yeah, that sums it all up. So yeah, that's Atelier Ryza 3, Alchemist of the End, and the Secret Key. Overall, a good evolution gameplay-wise, and the story is enjoyable. I like following the set of characters, and they did a good job of evolving them throughout the games. The performance of the game improved on the PS3, thank God. I wish they didn't try and tone down the fan service. Also, having certain outfits only be available to people buying the digital deluxe versions. I mean, pardon my language, but that's just shit. Especially for people who bought the limited edition. Not to mention Koei Tecmo overcharges for Atelier games as far as I'm concerned. You could maybe argue not the game itself, but with all the stupid season pass BS, then yeah. But yeah, a really fun game. If you like the world, gameplay, and the cast, then there really is no reason to dislike this game too much other than, the things I talked about there, like with fan service. The Secret series has been my favorite Atelier series since the Arlen series. Admittedly, I haven't played the other Atelier games, but, you know, those two series kind of, I guess, captured my imagination instantly, whereas the other ones didn't. So yeah, check it out if you're interested. If you have any of the other versions, as in not the PS5 version, I'd love to hear how it runs on your console or PC. And also everyone who has the LE, I'm curious if you agree with the points I made. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next video.